There's a word I keep coming back to when I think about what happens to a lot of men in their 40s and their 50s. Not crisis, not a breakdown. Drift. Drift. The experience of moving through your life without a clear sense of where you're actually going. Or more precisely, where you actually want to go. And the strange thing about drift is that from the outside it looks like nothing. The man is still there, still functioning, still doing everything that's required of him. He's just not quite sure anymore why. I want to describe what this actually feels like, because I don't think it gets described honestly very often. It's not depression, it's not the absence of motivation exactly. It's more like the compass stopped working. The compass stopped pointing to the right direction. The thing that used to orient you, the sense of direction that made the work feel like it was going somewhere. The internal pull towards something that felt genuinely yours. It's still there, technically, but it stopped giving clear readings. And so you move, you keep moving, because stopping feels worse. But the movement itself has lost the quality of intention. It has the shape of a life, the shape of a life without quite the substance of one. So I think drift is one of the most common experiences among men in their 40s and in their 50s. And one of the most actually quietly painful, because it's invisible from the outside. The man showing up for work every day, the man managing the household, handling the responsibilities, showing up in all the ways he's supposed to show up. The man is doing what he's required to do. But internally, something is missing. Not catastrophically, not in a way that demands immediate attention. Just consistently, persistently, and undeniably. A kind of flatness behind the functioning. The sense that the days are accumulating without quite adopting the right compass to go in the right direction. The days are accumulating, but they're not adding up to something that feels like it's his. And the worst part, the part that makes drift so hard to address, is that it comes without a clear explanation. Nothing specifically went wrong. The life is fine, genuinely fine, which means there's no obvious problem to solve, no enemy to identify. No single change that would clearly fix it. Just a man and his compass, and the compass reading nothing. But here is the strange part. Most men who drift in their 40s or 50s assume the drift is the problem. They try to fix the feeling, push harder, set new goals, change the scenery. They try to find something that will restore the old sense of forward motion. But most men misunderstand this completely, because the drift isn't the problem. The drift is a symptom, and the thing it's a symptom of isn't weakness or failure or burnout. It's a very specific gap. The gap between the external structure and the internal direction. Here is what I mean. In the first half of life, a man's direction is largely supplied from the outside. The career path, the social expectations, the sequence of milestones that the culture has laid out and that most men follow without examining it closely. And that external structure provides direction. It gives the compass something to point at. But at some point in life, and usually it's after 40, after 50, a man has largely completed the external sequence. The milestones are behind him. The structure is in place. And the external compass, which was doing most of the work, stopped being sufficient because it was pointing at external destinations. And he's arrived. And now that he is arrived, the question is, where does he want to go next? Not where the structure says to go, where he wants to go. And most men, when they arrive at that question, discover that the internal compass, the one pointing at the genuine desire, genuine values, and genuine meaning, hasn't been used for a long time. I find this important. Drift is almost never a sudden development. It builds quietly over years. That's why I wanted to share this with you. And usually it starts with small compressions. The thing that you cared about. That thing gradually got less time. The version of yourself that needed space, creative, reflective, even curious space, that slowly got crowded out by obligation. The private interests that got filed under later, until later became so far away, it stopped feeling like a real destination. And as those things compressed, the life became more efficient and less inhabited, more functional and less alive. And this is where things become interesting, because drift doesn't feel like loss when it's happening. It feels like priority management. You're making trade-offs, reasonable trade-offs. The family needs this. The career requires that. There's only so much time. And every trade-off feels justifiable. Until one day you look at what's left and realize that the things you kept trading away were the things that were keeping the compass calibrated. The things that made the movement feel intentional, that made the direction chosen rather than just follow it. And without them, the movement continues, yes, but the sense of going somewhere real, quietly disappears. And that's something that changes after 40, after 50, that makes drift both more likely and more visible. The external scaffolding starts to shift. The career reaches a kind of plateau. The children need you differently. The social identity that was built around certain roles starts to loosen. And in that loosening, in the gap between who you were and who you are becoming, the drift becomes harder to ignore. Because the structures that were providing direction are no longer doing quite as much work. And the internal compass, the one pointing at what you actually want from your one life, needs to pick up the slack. Except for most men, it hasn't been used that way. It was calibrated for someone else's true north. And now he's being asked to find its own. And most men feel this as disorientation. And it is disorientation. But it's also an opportunity of a very specific kind. The opportunity to do something most men never do in their first half of their lives. To actually decide consciously from the inside what they want the remaining chapter to be about. Here is the psychological truth at the center of drift. A man drifts when the life he is living has become disconnected from the values that make it meaningful to him. Not the values he's supposed to hold, the ones he actually holds. The specific things, private, personal, sometimes hard to articulate, that make a particular day feel like it actually mattered. That make the effort feel worth it. That make him feel, at the end of the day, like he's moving toward something that is genuinely his. And the tragedy of drift, if there is a tragedy, is not that a man lost his values. He didn't lose them. They got quieter under the noise of obligation and expectation and the relentless management of the adult life. They went quiet, and the drift is what happens when you've been living out of alignment with them long enough that the compass stops giving readings you recognize. The way through drift is not a new goal. It's not a new goal. It's not a bigger project or necessarily a career change or a midlife reinvention. It's something quieter and harder. It's sitting with the question of what you actually value, not what you should value, not what you've been optimizing for. What actually matters to you? What you'd choose if no one was watching and nothing needed to be justified. And then finding one way, just one, to orient a day toward that. That's how the compass starts giving readings again, not all at once, 1 degree at a time. So let me ask you something honest. Is there something you used to do or something you used to be that you've slowly stopped making room for? Not a dramatic thing, not necessarily something that the world would notice. Just something that was yours. Something that made you feel like yourself in a way that the functional, the reasonable, the showing up version of you doesn't quite reach. A way of thinking, a way of spending time, an interest that never made it onto the calendar because there was always something more important. Because for most men in their 40s and in their 50s, the drift started right there. In the small, quiet disappearance of the things that were most privately yours. Indeed, if you can name that thing, if you can point to it, that's actually significant. Because it means the compass isn't broken. It's just being pointed away from the true north for a long time. And knowing where true north is the beginning of finding your way back to it. Men drift in their 40s and in their 50s, not because they stopped caring, not because the life went wrong, not because they made bad choices. They drift because the external structure that was providing direction stopped being sufficient. And the internal structure, the one built from genuine values and genuine desire, that one was never fully developed. Because no one told them it needed to be. The first half of life rewards following the external map. The second half asks for something different. It asks a man to draw his own map. Not from scratch, not by rejecting what came before, but by sitting honestly with the question of what matters to him, what he wants to have meant something. What he'd regret not having tried. And that moving, even slightly, even imperfectly, in that direction, that's not inspiration. That's not motivation. That's a man using his compass again. I think drift gets a bad reputation because it feels like failure, like losing your way. But I've come to think of it differently. Drift is what happens when a man has outgrown the direction he was given and hadn't found the one he's going to choose. It's the space between. And the space between, uncomfortable as it is also where the most honest self-examination happens. Where a man finally asks the questions that forward motion kept him from hearing. So, if you're drifting right now, if the compass has been quiet for a while, don't just push harder. Get quieter. Ask what it's been trying to tell you. It usually knows. Hit the like button if you want to let me know that you liked this video and you want me to create more. Also subscribe to the channel so you will receive the next video that I will create, and these are just my opinions. But I would like to hear your opinion, and it would be great if you will write it down here in the comments. So let's meet in the next video that you will find here, and I will see you there.